Hi, good to see you. A cleaner with a sick son was humiliated and fired by her boss days later. She almost fainted when she saw the balance in her bank account. Lucia, a short woman with dark hair always tied up in a low ponytail, was scrubbing the marble floor of the office with an efficiency that only years of practice could provide despite his years and the occasional pain in his back. He maintained an agile pace, moving through the large space with a mop that already seemed like an extension of his arms. The wrinkles on his face not only indicated his age, but also the life of worries and challenges that he had always faced, with a friendly smile for those who passed by. While Mr. Carballo finished cleaning the last corner of the office, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the corridor. The boss, with his rigid posture and severe countenance, was approaching quickly. Lucia already knew those steps and knew that they rarely brought good news. She stood up, putting her hand on her waist to relieve the pain a little, and turned to face him. "Lucia, I need to talk to you," said Mr. Carballo, his voice sounding colder than usual. "Come to my office now." Without waiting for an answer, he turned and walked back to his office, hands crossed behind his back. Everyone in the office began to look at Lucia, who felt her cheeks heat up with shame. "What would Mr. Carballo want with me?" she asked herself nervously, with her heart beating faster. Lucia continued to feel a growing anxiety as she entered the room and found Mr. Carballo already seated behind his large Koba desk, his expressionless face. "Sit down," he ordered, pointing to the chair in front of the table. Lucia obeyed, her mind spinning with possible reasons for that sudden meeting. "Mr. Carballo, something has happened." His voice trembled slightly with uncertainty, making his words almost a whisper. "I'll go straight to the point, Lucia. I can't continue having you as an employee," he declared without an iota of excitement or sympathy. The words hit Lucia like a punch. "But Mr. Carballo, I always did everything they asked me to do. I arrived on time." I never missed, her voice failing as she tried to assimilate the news. "The truth is that she has been an extremely incompetent employee. Instead of working, you spend a lot of time staring into space. This company is for competent people, something that you are not. I order you to empty your closet and leave the building immediately," he continued, already returning his attention to the papers in front of him, as if Lucia were no longer there. Lucia stood up, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "I understand, Mr. Carballo. Excuse me," she said, her voice filled with emotion, walking back to her closet. Mr. Carballo's words echoed in her mind, each step seeming heavier than the last while she emptied her closet, tears flowing freely. "How am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to pay my bills? Debts and my son's school," she murmured to herself. Every memory of her routine and the small joys that work brought her now tinged with the pain of loss. She placed her personal possessions in a cardboard box, the weight of uncertainty and fear settling on her shoulders. The entire office began to look at her, however. Mr. Carballo left his office, and when he noticed Lucia, his gaze became furious. "You are a useless incompetent. Come on, I want you to leave here," he shouted, humiliating everyone's forehead. "Get out of my company," he ordered, making Lucia's eyes fill with tears. Lucia left the office with her head down, trying to ignore the looks of pity and murmurs from her colleagues. She was holding the cardboard box, clutched to her chest as if trying to contain the tumult of emotions that threatened to overflow. Mr. Carballo's cruel words still echoed in her ears as she crossed the hall, each step a reminder of the humiliation she had just suffered when she arrived home with a piece of paper stuck to it. At the door, he caught her attention with hands that trembled painfully. He read the eviction notice. The rent was 2 months late. The tears that until then he had managed to hold back finally escaped. "How am I going to solve this?" he wondered. She was desperate. The salary she received barely covered the medical expenses of her youngest son, Joa, whose health had deteriorated rapidly in recent months due to a chronic illness inside the house. The atmosphere was gloomy. The walls seemed to close in on her, each corner a reminder of the difficulties that seemed to have no end. Lucia placed the box on the table, dropping into a chair while she tried to gather her thoughts. "What am I going to do now?" the question echoed in her mind, becoming more and more urgent. Joao's situation aggravated everything. Recently, he had had another crisis, and the doctors warned that the necessary treatments would become even more frequent and expensive. Lucia had always juggled finances to ensure that her son lacked nothing. But now, without a job and with the threat after losing her home, the reality of her helplessness hit her with all its force. She prepared dinner for her son. Last tablet in the box, I need to find a way out, Portia, she thought, just when the son was falling asleep after the medicine took effect. Oh my God, how am I going to pay for Jua's medicine? Give me a way out, please. Lucia prayed with her unwavering faith. Sleeping seemed impossible for she, due to her nervousness, lay on her bed. Worries were spinning in her mind, a whirlwind that left no room for anything else. So when she decided to check her bank account online, a last attempt to plan the steps. Although she knew that little or nothing was left there, with a tight heart, Lucia accessed her account expecting to see the almost zero negative balance that she feared so much. However, what she saw on the screen made her blink in disbelief. Her balance showed an amount that she never imagined possessing. This can't be real, she whispered, fearing that even speaking too loudly could make those numbers disappear. They've deposited a fortune in my bank account. Lucia looked at the computer screen in disbelief. The blue light flashed. It reflected on his tired face, illuminating the tears that still marked his cheeks. This must be a mistake, he muttered. The screen blinked as if challenging his confusion with trembling fingers. He refreshed the page, but the number remained the same. A fortune inexplicably deposited in his account. He stood up from the desk. Scylla, feeling a mixture of hope and fear with this, she could pay for Joao's treatment, the rent, everything. The possibility brought a momentary relief, but the uncertainty still weighed on her heart where it came from. This, and what if it's a mistake and they ask me back? At that moment, a weak moan coming from Yamo's room cut the stillness of the night. Lucia ran towards him, finding her son writhing in pain in his bed. Mom, hurts a lot. Yuri, what an eye. She's still holding the stomach with her little hands. I'll take you to the hospital, my love. Everything is going to be okay, Lucia said, trying to hide the panic in her voice. She quickly put on a jacket over her pajamas and helped Joan get up, her small body much lighter than it should be. Be on the way to the hospital. The silence was only interrupted by Juan's labored breathing. Lucia was driving with one hand on the wheel and the other holding her son's hand. Hold on tight. We're almost there. She whispered a silent prayer accompanying each word. Upon arriving at the hospital, Lucia carried Joa to the hospital. The emergency room, please. My son needs help, he implored the nurse who approached them. The woman, sensing the urgency, immediately called a doctor while Joao was being examined. Lucia was waiting in the hallway, walking one step at a time. Side by side, the uncertainty about the origin of the money in his account and the fear for his son's health were intertwined. Each thought a torment for his health, and if I use this money to pay for the hospital and then I have to pay it back, what do I do? He asked himself. Feeling paralyzed by indecision, the doctor soon appeared, his expression serious, conveying news that Lucia feared. His situation is serious. We need to admit him immediately for more tests and perhaps surgery. He has an intestinal obstruction that needs to be resolved. Once your son's chronic health condition has been resolved, it will not be cheap, but if he does not receive treatment, I fear for his son's life, said the doctor sincerely. But doctor, how can I pay? Lucia said quickly, the fear of losing the opportunity for treatment for Joan. Overcoming her concern about the mysterious money, Lucia knew that she should talk about the money with the police, but the most important thing was to ensure the life of her son. Then she would find a way to replace the money. We will take care of him. If he can pay, we will prepare everything. You can authorize the procedures here, the doctor explained, handing him the forms while Lucia filled out the papers with the pen trembling in her hands. She made a decision. I am going to use this money. It is an opportunity to save Joan. This money will ensure the life of my son. I need to trust that. She thought every word, filling her with a cautious determination. After signing the documents, Lucia sat next to Joao's bed holding his hand while he fell asleep under the effect of the medication. I'm going to find out everything about him. This money, my son, but first I'm going to make sure you're okay. She whispered a silent promise between her and the darkness of the room. In the following days, Lucia was at Io's bedside observing every improvement and every fragile smile that her son offered her. Although concerned about the mysterious origin of the money, she used the funds to settle immediate debts and ensure the continuity of her son's medical treatment. Everything is fine. Now on, you will see. Everything is going to be fine. She whispered constantly, trying to convincing herself more than her son. When Juan was finally discharged, Lucia's relief was palpable. However, the doctor seriously alerted her he is better now, but will need to continue the treatment. We cannot take the risk of interrupting it, because he could return to the hospital. Lucia nodded, understanding the seriousness of the situation, while helping Juan get into the wheelchair. When he arrived with his son from the hospital, Lucia passed by the sidewalk and found her neighbor Dona Maria passed out at the door of her house. Without doubting this, he called the ambulance and began to provide help to the neighbor, but as soon as the woman's husband arrived, he told him that they did not have money to go to the hospital and pay the medical expenses, so Lucia used part of the money to give the man a gesture of kindness that did not go unnoticed by the community. However, a few days later, not everyone viewed her actions favorably. Resentment began to grow among some neighbors. Murmurs of envy and suspicions about Lucia's sudden fortune began to spread through the narrow houses of the neighborhood. As she, a simple cleaner, suddenly has so much money, something is not right. She paid for the treatment of her son and the neighbor, they commented on the corners. Lucia knew that she needed to solve the mess that was in her life. At dawn, it was already standing, the house still enveloped in the darkness of the beginning of the day. Determined to reveal the origin of that money, turned on the computer to check the balance and print the account statement. Let's see what is happening here, Lucia murmured, typing the password. With fingers that were still trembling when the screen finally loaded, the number that appeared made his heart stop for an instant. The balance had decreased significantly, but how can they not authorize the details? Looking for some explanation for the mysterious disappearance of the money. This can't be happening, he whispered to herself. Her eyes widened, scanning the transactions listed, all of them unknown, none of them made by her. Lucia's breathing became heavy, the weight of the uncertainty becoming almost unbearable. If the money disappears, I will not have how to pay for Joan's treatment, she thought, fearing for her son's life. That was her only alternative, since no job would pay an amount as high as her son's treatment. Lucia decided that she needed a plan to investigate on her own, without involving the bank more than necessary. Began by reviewing all bank transactions again, noting every detail that seemed out of the ordinary. Each strange transaction, every date and time was meticulously recorded in a notebook that began to look more like a research diary. Meanwhile, Lucia kept an eye on Joao's health and medical expenses, ensuring that the treatment was not interrupted. She began searching the internet to see if anyone else had had any change in her bank balance, until a message from a woman caught Lucia's attention. I saw something strange in my account the other day. A high value in money appeared, and shortly after, exorbitant charges began to appear. I lost all the money I had, even the one I received before the mysterious transaction, said one of the people on the internet. She was wondering if she should return the money, call the police, but the image of Joao sleeping peacefully and with his health improving reaffirmed that I had to do everything that I could. For him. For you, my son. I'm going to the end, Lucia promised, closing the laptop and preparing for what was to come. Until the last few weeks, Lucia was an honest woman. She had a simple job and never needed to resort to illicit things. However, desperation at seeing her son suffer led her to take drastic measures to ensure the life of her child. Joan, despite being improving, still seemed so fragile and small to face such a serious health problem. Lucia could not imagine how it would be her life without her son, so she knew she would do anything until the treatment was completed the next day. Lucia noticed that another large amount had been withdrawn from her balance. Now, she barely had enough to pay the next one. Joa's query. Then Lucia grabbed her laptop and began investigating until she managed to track down the mysterious transactions that, to her surprise and horror, pointed to an unexpected source: her bank manager himself. A man named Mr. Almeida can't be muttered to her. Herself reviewing the data to be sure there was no error. The evidence was clear. The transactions led directly to the manager's personal account, and not only to her account, but also to several others' accounts abroad linked to him. Lucia knew that she had to report. However, the fear of not having treatment for her son made her tremble. And if I keep the money a little longer, she thought, and at the same time she doubted, and it keeps getting worse and I don't have how to pay for his treatment. She debated with herself tirelessly until she made the decision that left her mother's heart tight with suffocating pain. I am an honest person, and I need to remain that way. I will find another way to save my son, she decided. But then she looked at Joao playing calmly and finally recovering his health. and she knew she couldn't let this go. I have to be an example for you. Joao was determined. Lucia was determined and went to the bank, determined to confront Mr. Almeida before going to the police station. She arrived early, hands cold with nervousness but determination signing each step she took towards the manager's office upon arrival. She was agitated, but had decided to confront him to find out the truth before going to the police. Mr. Almeida, my name is Lucia. I am a client of this bank for many years. I need to talk to you. Lucia began as soon as he entered his office, closing the door behind Yes with a soft click. His expression was calm, but there was a cautious gleam in his eyes. Mrs. Lucia, how can I help you today? He asked, his calm voice hiding his surprise at seeing her there. Lucia noticed that the man was nervous because he moved restlessly and also spilled several objects since she arrived. Don't pretend with me, Mr. Almeida. I know about the transactions. I know that he used my account too. Hi, dirty money. How could Lucia? Said the firm voice. Despite the internal tremor, he felt the manager's face change. Then the mask of politeness fell for a moment before he composed himself. Lucia, I think you are misinformed. Those are serious accusations, and if I were you would be very careful with what you say. I have proof, Mr. Almeida. Do not think that you will go unpunished. I am not going to let this happen, Lucia replied, feeling a mixture of fear and anger. You do not know who you are dealing with. Lucia would advise you to think very carefully. Well, on your next step, you had very suspicious transactions in your account a few days ago, and you did not report them to the police. No, I will be the only one harmed. I can block your account at any time, but everything of yours will be blocked. You will probably be arrested, he said, his voice low and threatening. No, please, my son is sick. He only has me to take care of him, Lucia cried, afraid that the man would carry out his threats. Joao would die without his mother's care, so Lucia, I suggest that you keep what you know and that you do not go to the hospital. Police, otherwise you will be arrested and your son will be left without a mother, or it would be you who would be left without your son, he said ironically, not caring about Lucia's affliction and her mother's fears. Lucia left the room quickly, her heart beating disorderly. She knew she had gotten into something very dangerous, but she also knew that there was no turning back. When she left the bank, Lucia noticed that a car was following her since she left home. She had seen the same vehicle with the same license plate in the morning. With her heart in her mouth, Lucia sped through El Paso, trying to lose to its follower on the busy streets. What did I do? He thought, fearing for his safety and even more for Joao's safety. He did what he could to mislead the car without. Until when could he flee? If he went to the police, they would know. However, before he could reach the police station, Lucia received a call from her neighbor, Mrs. Carmen. Lucia, Joao is not feeling well. Come home, she said from the other side of the line, nervous about the child's state of health. Lucia did everything possible to reach her son's heart faster, anguished by fear. Wait for the worst to happen. Hold on, Joao. I'm coming, she said as she headed home. When she arrived, she found Joan almost passed out in her neighbor's arms. I gave him the medicine, but he's not getting better, the neighbor explained. Lucia immediately provided first aid to her son. While she asked the neighbor to call the ambulance, the walk to the hospital was exasperating. Lucia had never seen her son breathing so weak. She knew that what was left in her account would hardly be enough to pay. The hospital was hectic, but Lucia barely noticed the hustle and bustle around her. Her focus was on Juan, whose condition seemed to deteriorate with each minute. She sat next to his bed in the emergency room. She held his small, cold hand, whispering words of consuelo. Even if your own heart was taken by fear, let's do everything we can, madam, said the doctor Acer with a serious expression. But the necessary treatment is quite expensive. We need to start as soon as possible. To guarantee the best chance of recovery for him, I will get the money. Please, just start the treatment, Lucia implored, her voice charged with emotion. The doctor nodded with a sympathetic expression and walked away to prepare the medications. Lucia took her phone with trembling hands to transfer what necessary. He accessed the bank application, his heart beating with hope. However, when he tried to enter his account, an error message appeared on the screen. Access to the account was temporarily blocked for reasons. Security notification said, no, this can't be happening now. Lucia muttered to herself, trying again. But without success, she felt a wave of panic rise through her body. Without access to the funds, how would she pay for Shua's treatment? Lucia called the bank immediately, her trembling voice, while explaining the situation to the operator. Please, you have to help me. My son is in the hospital. I need that money, madam. I understand your situation, but with the recent blockade, due to suspicious activities, we need the madam. Come personally to the bank to resolve this issue, the operator explained, his voice calm in contrast to the desperate urgency that Lucia felt. Lucia looked at Joao, who was breathing hard. Hold on tight, my love, Mom. She's going to solve this, he said, caressing her pale face with tears in his eyes. Asked to speak on the phone with Mr. Almeida, determined to release the funds in any way, no matter what. As soon as Mr. Almeida responded, Lucia got straight to the point. I need the blocking of my account to be retired. My son is in the hospital waiting for treatment that I cannot pay for while you hold my money, madam. We are doing this to protect the madam and the bank from further fraud, the manager tried to explain, but Lucia was beyond the point of rational discussions. I would not. Your explanations matter. Now my son needs me. I need that money, Lucia insisted, her voice raised, attracting glances from other patients in the hospital. The manager was slow to respond. I'm going to see what I can do, he said, increasing Lucia's apprehension. After some tense moments, he spoke. If I can temporarily release access, could he maintain his discretion? He asked, making Lucia feel her heart race. Would she have to ally herself with a criminal to save her son? I am an honest woman, Mr. Almeida. Help me. I cannot lose my son. She begged to speak more. For herself than for the man. Things in the bank are comp they are investigating. If I don't release the money now, I may not be able to do it in the future. In fact, I'm still not sure if I will be able to release. It will be an attempt in return of his silence, he said. Lucia saw her son snort, leaving his face red from lack of air. Do whatever is necessary immediately, she said, crying in desperation. Mr. Almeida accepted, and as soon as Lucia finished the call, she was shaking. She screamed to call. She went to the doctor again, nervous. Luckily, he was still close to Juan and was able to start the treatment. As soon as Juan was breathing regularly again, Lucia went directly to the payment counter ready to secure the treatment. Juan, let's take care of this now, he said as he swiped the card, closing his eyes and hoping for the best. However, when he opened his eyes and saw the terminal screen asking for authorization, his heart stopped. What would he do if the payment was not approved now? The payment terminal. It issued a long beep, and the screen finally showed the message authorization granted. Lucia breathed deeply, feeling immense relief while tears of gratitude ran down her face. Thank you, she murmured almost inaudibly, her heart still beating. Disorderly due to the fear that almost consumed her moments ago, she turned and ran back to Joao's side, whose treatment had already begun. The doctors worked quickly administering the necessary medications. Joao's improvement was almost immediate, his breathing stabilizing, the color returning to his face. Lucia, he held Joao's hand, feeling life pulse harder in his son's veins. You're going to be okay, my love. Mom is here, he whispered, allowing himself a moment of relief in the storm that was her life now. However, the relief was brief. The tranquility of the hospital room was abruptly interrupted by the sound of heavy footsteps and authoritative voices. Lucia looked up, her heart sinking as she saw two uniformed police officers approaching, one of them holding a document. Lucia Gomez, one of the officers called, his voice firm and unquestionable. Yes, it's me. What's going on? Lucia responded, trying to stay calm, although her stomach was twisting with a new fear. Mrs. Gomez, we have an arrest warrant on your name for suspected bank fraud and money laundering, the other police officer stated, showing him the paper. You need to come with us now. No, please, Lucia implored, the words coming out in a frantic torrent. My son has just been stabilized. I can't leave him. We understand his situation, but we need him to cooperate and come with us to clarify everything at the police station, the first policeman insisted, his expression impassive. Lucia looked desperately at Joan, who was slowly regaining consciousness. Mom, what is happening? He murmured, confused and scared. Everything is going to be fine, dear. I'm just going to resolve a misunderstanding and I'll be back. Lucia tried to smile at him, hiding the panic and uncertainty she felt. She turned towards the police officers, nodding her head in resignation. I'll go with you. But please, let me tell you, to the nurse to take care of my son while I'm gone. The police agreed, and Lucia quickly called the nurse, briefly explaining the situation and assuring that Igeo would not be left alone with a heavy heart. She followed the police down the corridor, each step taking her away from Joao, each step taking her towards an uncertain future. I just wanted to save my son, Lucia thought as she was escorted through the hospital corridors. The reality of her situation began to set in, each step an echo of her decisions. Afterwards, she knew that the next few hours would be crucial in determining the course of her life and that of her son. As Lucia was led out of the hospital, she felt every glance directed at her full of judgment and suspicion along the way to the hospital. The police station was silent except for the muffled sound of the police radio occasionally emitting unintelligible communications. Lucia was lost in thought, trying to organize her arguments. And how could she explain the situation without further compromising herself upon arriving at the police station? Lucia was taken to her room. Interrogation, a sterile space with only a table and some chairs. A detective soon entered, his posture rigid but his gaze not totally devoid of emphatic. Mrs. Gomez, I am the Marais detective. I am here to better understand your situation before making any judicial decision. Please tell me everything from the beginning, he began, opening his notebook. Lucia breathed deeply, the uncertainty still dominating her thoughts, but she knew that this was her chance to try to clarify things. Recounting everything from the appearance of the money in his bank account to the events that led to his arrest, explained about Juan's health condition, the mysterious transactions, and his desperate attempt to save her son's life. I understand it seems suspicious, but I'm just a mother trying to save her son. I know I should have reported it sooner, but I was desperate to help my son, concluded Lucia, tears threatening to escape as she struggled to maintain her composure. Detective Marais observed her carefully, noting every detail, and regarding the bank manager, Mr. Almeida mentioned that he knew about the transactions. Yes, I confronted him and said that I would report. However, Mr. Almeida hinted that he could block my account at any time. He knew about the money and even suggested that I keep silent about the matter, Lucia responded, feeling a wave of anger as she remembered the veiled threat. The detective nodded, writing down more information. This is very serious. We will need to investigate this further. Thoroughly. For now, we will keep her here until we can verify all her claims. It is standard procedure, and also for her own safety, explained. Lucia felt devastated, realizing that she had no other option than to cooperate. Please alone. Help me. My son needs me. He has no one else. He asked, his voice almost a whisper. We will do what is possible, Mrs. Gomez. I promise you, said Detective Marais, getting up and leaving the room, leaving Lucia alone with her children. Thoughts and fears. While Lucia waited in the cold and isolated room of the police station, she thought about Joao, hoping that he would be safe and being well taken care of. The uncertainty about the future tormented her, but the determination to maintain her son's health kept her going. I'm going to get out of this for you, Joe, she murmured to herself, clinging to the small flame of hope that still burned in her heart. While Lucia remained in the cold interrogation room of the police station, the weight of uncertainty and fear becoming almost unbearable. Every minute that passed seemed like an hour. Every sound in the corridor made her jump, waiting for news, any news about her situation or about Joan. After a few hours that seemed like an eternity, Detective Marais returned, his face wearing a serious countenance that it did not seem to portend good news. Mrs. Gomez, we have spoken with the bank and we began to verify their statements. However, there are complications. He began by sitting in front of her with a folder full of documents. Complications? What do you mean? My son is fine. Please, I need to know. Lucia implored, the obvious anxiety in his trembling voice. His son is stable for now, according to the hospital, but in his case we found records that the suspicious transactions were actually authorized from a computer in his residence, Marais explained, opening the folder and showing him some documents. That is impossible. I did not make those transactions. Someone must have invaded my house or something. I am just a mother trying to save her son. I do not know anything about these technical procedures. The farthest I arrived was to do a search, Lucia responded, frustration and fear shaping her words. We understand, but that complicates her situation. We need to investigate further. In the meantime, as a precaution, we will have to keep her in custody. Her association with suspicious money and the bank manager's threats make it essential that we keep her safe and isolated. As we continue forward, the detective said, closing the folder with a sharp click. Lucia felt the floor open under her custody. But what about my son? I need to be with him. You can't do this. I didn't do anything wrong, he said, his voice rising in desperation. I understand and sympathize with your situation, Mrs. Gomez, but we have procedures to follow. It is also for your own safety considering the threats she mentioned. Maurice tried to explain, her voice by maintaining a professional calm that contrasted sharply with the emotional turmoil of Lucia. Being taken to a small cell inside the police station, Lucia sat on a hard bench, her hands trembling as she tried to assimilate the reality of her situation. The isolation and the uncertainty about the future enveloped her like a dense fog, making it difficult for her to think or breathe as night fell. Lucia found herself alone with her thoughts, increasingly consumed by the darkness. Concern for Gua and the anguish of his own helplessness. How am I going to protect you now? Joao whispered in the darkness, his words lost in the silence of the cell. The tension increased when in the middle of the night, Lucia heard footsteps approaching her cell. A guard appeared in front of her. The door, a solemn expression on her face. Mrs. Gomez, the detective Maurice wants to see you. There is news about the case, he announced, unlocking the door with a metallic click. Lucia quickly got up, her heart beating, hoping for good news, but also fearing what might come next. As she entered the interrogation room, Lucia was greeted not only by Detective Maurice, but also by a man she did not recognize. Had a confident posture. He was wearing a well-cut suit and was observing Lucia with a meditative expression as he next to him. A leather suitcase was leaning on the table. Mrs. Gomez, this is Mr. Renato Vargas. He is a lawyer specialized in criminal law and has agreed to represent her in this case. Detective Maurice presented a gesture that surprised to Lucia, igniting a spark of hope. Good evening, Lucia. I have read about your case, and I am here to help you go through this difficult situation, said Renato, extending his hand for a firm shake. I am going to ensure that you have all the necessary support, Mr. Renato, Lucia responded, feeling that a weight was lifted slightly from his shoulders. I really don't know much about what happened before the money went into my account. I'm just trying to take care of my son. I understand perfectly well, and we'll do everything we can within our reach to clarify her situation and ensure that she can return to her son as soon as possible, Renato assured, sitting next to her and opening his suitcase to take out some documents. The police officer left her alone with the lawyer, and Renato began to review the details of the case with Lucia, explaining each step they would have to take. First, we are going to request that they review all the accusations against you. Because it is a delicate situation, we are also going to contest the blocking request on your account and investigate further. Background: the allegations of fraud associated with the bank manager, the lawyer detailed. While they were arguing, Renato took several notes, asking specific questions about each interaction that Lucia had had with the bank and the manager. It is essential to document everything meticulously. Any detail can be crucial for her defense, he explained. That the conversation was interrupted when Detective Maurice returned with a file containing the bank's security recordings and login logs showing suspicious activities coinciding with the timing of the questioned transactions. With the assistance of Renato, Lucia felt she finally had an ally in the fight to clear her name and protect her son. Renato organized a series of actions, including preparation for a hearing that would take place at next day. We will ensure that the truth comes to light, Lucia. You are not alone in this. I have a son in a similar health situation, and I identified with your case. We do crazy things to guarantee health and well-being of them, stated Renato, as they stood to leave the police station while Lucia returned to the cell with Renato, promising to return the next day to take her to trial. The courtroom was filled with tension and expectation when Lucia entered, accompanied by her lawyer Renato. She felt every glance directed at her loaded with unspoken judgments and silent expectations. Her heart beat fast, not only because of the fear of what could be decided, but also because of concern for her son Joao, whose health she was still fragile. As she sat down, Lucia tried to control her breathing, trying to calm her nerves as the judge took her place. Renato gave her a reassuring look, whispering, "We are ready for this. Trust the process." Began with the prosecutor presenting the case against Lucia, detailing the accusations of bank fraud and money laundering. Talked about the suspicious transactions, the money inexplicably deposited in her account, and its subsequent use. Lucia felt herself sinking a little in her chair with each word. Accusation seeming heavier than the last. Then it was Renato's turn to present the defense, described Lucia's desperate situation, a single mother fighting for her son's life, explained how the money appeared unexpectedly, and how in the desperation of a mother Lucia used the funds to save her son without knowing the origin. Lucia Gomez acted instinctively moved by the unconditional love of a mother and not with criminal intent, argued Renato after a long period of deliberation. The judge finally pronounced the verdict considering everything presented and the state of need of the accused. This court declares Lucia Gomez innocent of the accusations of bank fraud and money laundering. However, the accused is ordered to assume full reimbursement of the money that was used. For her son's treatment, the courtroom was filled with murmurs when the judge announced the decision. Lucia felt a wave of relief at being found innocent, but the reality of her new debt hit her hard. Total strength. How would I pay that enormous amount? I barely knew how I would pay the bill for the hospital where Guo was hospitalized. How would I manage to repay another such large sum of money? Renato approached, putting a comforting hand on her shoulder. We will find a solution. Lucia, have faith, he said gently as he left the hospital. Lucia was free of criminal accusations, but she carried a new weight, the massive debt that she did not know how to solve. She walked slowly, lost in thought. Each step took her back to the reality of her life. Everyday life. Now that I am free, how will I pay for Joao's treatment? How will I pay this new debt? Lucia reflected with a heavy heart. I cannot fail now, not when one still needs so much from me. She arrived at the hospital happy to see her son better, giving him a calm smile, oblivious to the financial problems that hung over them. Seeing him so carefree gave Lucia a reason to fight, to find a way to overcome this new obstacle. For you, Juan, for us, I will find a way, he promised himself. Even without knowing how she would fulfill that promise, the phone rang at an unexpected moment, interrupting Lucia's gloomy thoughts. She hesitated before answering, her heart still marked by the recent struggles on the other side of the line. There was a voice that she did not expect to hear again. Mr. Carballo, the same boss who had humiliated and fired her months ago. Lucia, it's me, Carballo. I need to talk to you, he began, his voice containing an unusual tremor. I've been thinking a lot about what happened, about how I treated you, Lucia. She held the phone tighter, surprise and wariness mixing inside her. I really didn't know about your son, about your situation. I misjudged your actions. I thought you were just distracted, and I was wrong, deeply wrong, he continued, clearly struggling to find the words. I read about your case, about the trial and everything you went through. I can't even imagine how difficult it must have been. The sincerity in La Voz de Carballo was palpable, and Lucia felt a pang of surprise when she realized that her former executioner seemed genuinely sorry. I am calling to apologize, Lucia, and to try to correct a mistake. If you allow me, I want to offer you your job back if you are willing to return, and more than that, the company will cover all of your son's medical expenses and expenses. I consider it the least we can do to begin to repair the damage caused, he said. Lucia was silent for a moment, conflicting emotions swirling within her. The offer was more than she could have. I had hoped for an opportunity not only for financial stability, but also for a new beginning free of the worries that had distressed her so much. I am grateful, Mr. Carballo. This means a lot to me. I accept. Lucia finally responded, her trembling voice with a mixture of relief and renewal of hope. Thank you, Lucia. And again, I apologize. I hope that in time we can put the past behind us and move forward, Carballo said, and there was a weight of sincerity that Lucia had never heard before from him. Lucia sat on the phone, allowing the reality of Carballo's words to sink in. She was free of legal accusations and now had the support necessary to ensure Joao's well-being. More than that, she had received something rarely granted in life, a second chance, not only in terms of employment, but an opportunity for reconciliation and forgiveness. It was finally discovered by the judge that Mr. Almeida, manager of the bank, diverted money from the institution and deposited it in the client's accounts, and little by little, transferred all the money to her own account. So the client seemed guilty of their crimes. Lucia discovered that she was a client who, like many, received a huge amount in her bank account. After the judge's discovery, Mr. Almeida was arrested, and it was proven all her crimes of fraud, theft, and attempted embezzlement of money. When the case was solved, Lucia was finally relieved. But she needed to rebuild her life. Returning to work where she had suffered her greatest humiliation would not be easy, but Lucia knew that people could surprise just like Carballo. He had shown a facet that she never expected to see. Maybe there was room for more understanding, more humanity, even where it is least expected. Sometimes the greatest pains bring surprising turns of redemption. Lucia reflected, a slight smile touching her eyes. Lips while looking at Joan. At first the return to old job, it was very difficult. The corridors and rooms still resonated with memories of the past, and she felt the curious and sometimes critical glances of some former colleagues. However, the constant and genuinely repentant presence of Mr. Carballo, who made it a point to support her personally, began to soften the edges of the past. As the months went by, forgiveness was shown to be a transformative force for both Lucia and Carballo. The honesty of him about his mistakes and the visible effort to compensate for his past failures helped heal the old wounds. Little by little, an unexpected friendship blossomed between them, founded on mutual respect. Lucia recognized for she herself had made a mistake by spending the money, even if it was for a good cause to save her son. It was still a mistake and a deviation from honesty. So that understanding opened a space in her heart to forgive and accept the forgiveness offered by Mr. Carballo. Everyone makes mistakes, including her. Since then, Lucia promised herself that she would never stop being the honest woman she was before. Her concerns about her son's health and all that money arose. Lucia's dedication and integrity did not pass unnoticed, and not long after her return she was promoted to housekeeping manager. This new position not only recognized her professionally, but also gave her a new platform to help other employees, ensuring that empathy and understanding were the basis of the work culture on her team. She would not allow anyone to be humiliated again in that company, and she strived to be the best manager for her employees personally. The greatest gift Lucia received was the complete recovery of Juano. That was his greatest joy. The medical treatments completely covered by the company as part of Mr. Carballo's apology were successful, and Joan emerged from his long battle for health not only cured but also stronger and more resilient. Lucia's gratitude to the doctors and everyone who supported her family during those difficult times was immense, and she made a point of expressing it whenever possible. Now on the verge of a new stage in her life, Joan was about to enter university with a mind acute and a thirst for knowledge that had only grown during his days in the hospital. He was eager to study biology, inspired by his own experience with doctors and treatments. Lucia watched with immense pride, almost without believing that the small, fragile child from before was now ready, embarking on such a great journey. The neighbors who judged Lucia apologized because they did not know everything the woman was going through, and that led to a new vision of camaraderie and help among them. It was a example to help each other, just as she did for the neighbor who got better thanks to her help. Lucia looked back at everything she had overcome, the struggles, the fear, the uncertainty, and felt a deep peace. The adversities had shaped a new and unexpected life, full of hope and new opportunities. She and Joan, united by trials, looked towards the future with optimism and courage. Sometimes life knocks us down, but here we are stronger and wiser. And together, Lucia thought, smiling at Juan, who smiled back at her. Brilliant life had been a tough teacher, but an effective teacher. They were ready for any challenge that might come next, facing it together as they had always done. If you like this story, we invite you to like it and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to continue bringing exciting stories almost every day. Don't miss the next amazing narrative that is about to appear on your screen. We greatly appreciate having it here with us. Now you can click on the links that are appearing on the screen right now. We have a special selection just for you, full of valuable stories and guaranteed entertainment. See you there.